Hi guys, I'm Mark from WP Mayor and today I'm here to talk to you about WP Rocket, the first premium only caching plugin for WordPress. Now before I get into the details of how WP Rocket works, I wanted to discuss some other things. Firstly, some or most of you might have been shocked when I said premium only caching plugin. If you've used a caching plugin before on a WordPress site, you probably worked with plugins such as W3 Total Cache, Hypercache, Super Cache, and so on. These are all free plugins and they all do a pretty good job. So at this moment even I ask myself, what's the point of paying for something I can get for free? Well, in reality I'm not. First of all, when I purchase a premium plugin, I know that I should be getting more than I would with a free one. More features, more support, more updates. But above that, WP Rocket is much more than a simple caching plugin. It offers better performance levels than its free alternatives, and it also includes an easier to use and better settings area. Because with most free plugins, you either get a settings area that's overly complicated and only experienced developers can understand, or an overly simplified one that limits what I can do. Yes, some of them do offer premium add-ons, but then you might as well just purchase a fully featured plugin in the first place. Now, speaking of features, WP Rocket has a long list of them. If you look at the comparison list here, you can see how much more you'll get with WP Rocket rather than with its free competitors. With the free plugins, you usually end up looking for other plugins to work in tandem with them that have the same functions that are usually present in WP Rocket. Just to mention a couple of the features that caught my eye, when purchasing this plugin you get a function called cache preloading. With this, WP Rocket uses its own robots to simulate a visit to your site, preloading the cache, and in turn improving your site's speed and even its indexing by search engines. The other feature is called lazy loading. This is something currently being used by quite a few of the major sites, such as YouTube and Facebook. What it does is it only loads an image on your page as it becomes visible. So if it's not on your screen, your browser won't load it. Then as you scroll down, it will load and appear. This decreases the load on your servers and quickens up your site a little bit more. Now let's get down to business. I'll be walking you through the whole plugin as I installed it on a site called Fit for Blogging. This is one of the sites run by WP Mayor's founder Jean Galia. So before I got to installing WP Rocket, I ran a few tests on Fit for Blogging to use as a comparison before and after configuring the plugin. I used two speed tests, Pingdom and GTmetrix. For each run I ran the test 3 times, always from the same location, and then took the average. Then I did the same after configuring the plugin and compared the two. Before installation, these were the results. Pingdom showed a load time of 3.68 seconds, a page size of 960 kilobytes, and a total of 90 requests. While GTmetrix showed a page load time of 4.46 seconds, a page size of 846 kilobytes, and a total of 74 requests. We'll see the difference at the end of this video. Let's get started with the installation. It's a simple process. And all you have to do is head to your dashboard, find the plugins section, click add new, and upload the file that you've purchased. Once you hit activate, you'll find WP Rocket listed under the settings area in your sidebar. Now we're ready to start optimizing our site. If you head on over to WP Rocket, you'll immediately notice the helpful descriptions and warnings that come with almost every setting. So even if you're a beginner and there are certain features you don't yet understand, this will help you out. So once WP Rocket is all set up, you can see the 7 tabs that open up. You have basic options, advanced options, CDN, tools, tutorials, FAQ, and support. Let's start with basic options. The first option in basic options is lazy loading images. This is the feature I mentioned earlier that loads images on a page only when they're visible to the user. As it says in the explanation, it reduces the number of HTTP requests and improves the loading time. Next up, we have files optimization. This includes the minification and concatenation of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files. Now, what do these really mean? Well, minification is the process of removing any spaces and comments in your CSS and JavaScript files. This in turn reduces the weight of each file and once again makes your site even faster. Concatenation, on the other hand, is a process of combining CSS and JavaScript files to once again reduce the HTTP requests and further improve the loading time. You can see we have a couple of warning signs here too. Basically, concatenation might cause certain errors in the CSS and JavaScript that might mess up some parts of your site. If this does happen, you can either just turn this option off or view the developer's video on how to overcome the problem, but you do need some coding knowledge for this. Up next is mobile cache. Pretty self-explanatory really. You just decide whether you want WP Rocket to enable caching on mobile devices or not. We have another warning sign here, this time informing us that should we have any of WP Touch, WP Mobile Detector, Wizzy App or WordPress Mobile Pack plugins installed, we should keep this option deactivated. Next is logged in user cache. I'd suggest keeping this off for one simple reason. When you're editing a site and checking out your updates, you want to make sure you're seeing the latest version of your work. If you enable this option, your browser might still load a cached version, meaning you won't be seeing your latest work. The following options are the SSL cache, where you choose whether you want to apply caching to pages with SSL protocol, and finally clear cache lifespan, where you decide how long you want the cache to exist for before it's automatically removed and recreated. This comes into play mostly if you've got some sort of RSS feed or latest tweets showing on your website. Now, moving on to the advanced options. All these options have explanations beneath them, so I'll just be skimming through them. First up is prefetch DNS requests. Now, WP Rocket's developers have taken it into their own hands to create their own video explaining what DNS is and how it's used correctly. So I'll let you follow that better in the link shown here. Next up are a few options for particular pages and files. So in the next box, you can list any pages you want to have their cache purged, or in layman's terms, emptied, when updating a post. After that is a list of pages you never want to be cached. And after that is a list of cookies that certain pages have that you don't want to be cached. Should you have any CSS files you want to exclude from minification, you can insert them in the next box. And the same with JavaScript in the following box. Finally, I have the options to choose which JavaScript files to include in the footer during the minification process, and which JavaScript files are to use deferred loading, meaning they'll be loaded asynchronously at the same time as the page loads. In both cases, you need to provide the complete URL of the files. The next tab is called CDN, Content Delivery Network. Now, rather than explaining this and going into detail about it during this video, I've added a link in the description of the video, which is a link to an article by Jean Gallia himself on WP Mayor, and it describes everything you need to know about CDNs. So you can go ahead and check that out, or if you know what CDNs are, you can go ahead and click on the tick box. And the final settings tab we have is the Tools tab. Now this has a few settings that might be useful for you. The first one has nothing to do with the plugin's performance. It's just a choice whether you want to become a beta tester for WP Rocket's beta program. That's completely up to you. Next comes the clear cache option. And it's just that, a one-click option to purge the cache for the entire site. Preload cache requests a bot crawl to preload the cache, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video. Settings exporter is an option to export the plugin settings in case you want to implement them on any other sites you run for yourself or for your clients. And finally, settings importer is just the opposite of that, a place to import those settings. Now the next three tabs regard documentation and support. The tutorials section offers 6 videos from the developers related to various topics on this plugin. Unfortunately, since this plugin was first released in France by French developers, the videos are all in French. So if you don't have a good grasp of the French language, I'm afraid you're going to have to try to figure them out by just following the images. Up next, the FAQ section has a pretty long list of frequently asked questions that might come in handy at one time or another. All of them have clear and concise explanations, so there shouldn't be any confusion there. Last but not least is support. This is just a link to the plugin support team in case the FAQs and videos weren't enough. So that's it. That's sort of WP Rocket, and next I'm going to be running those tests again and comparing my result. As I said earlier, we ran the same tests again on Pingdom and GT metrics. Now I only used the basic options on WP Rocket, and I also excluded a couple of pages on caching, which were the contact and the news pages, and I also left CDN unticked since there was another plugin running CDN for images already installed. Now let's see the results. Pingdom's load time reduced to 1.12 seconds. That was an improvement in the requests and the page size, and a much better overall grade. GT metrics, on the other hand, showed a decrease in page load time by 1.17 seconds, but the grade remained quite similar. Now it's important to note that the lack in improvement in the GT metrics grade has nothing to actually do with WP Rocket, but rather the way Fit for Blogging is set up. Basically, there's a few reasons that there wasn't such a considerable improvement as there was in Pingdom. On Fit for Blogging, the dimensions of the images are not specified directly in the HTML code, which means the browser has to calculate them every single time, and this slows down the performance. Also, Fit for Blogging loads images bigger than the ones being displayed, so resizing is being done on HTML, and if this is done correctly and the correct image size is inputted, then there'll be a massive reduction in page load time and performance. So as you can see in both tests, the improvements are substantial, especially when you consider that I only use the basic options that any beginner would understand. What this means is that WP Rocket can improve Fit for Blogging even further with just a bit more tinkering and testing. The more variations you test out, the better your site will perform, and the more worth it WP Rocket will be. Speaking of being worth it, WP Rocket has 3 packages on offer. The first is Personal, a one-site license costing $39. Then there's Business, the most commonly used, a 3-site license costing $99. And Pro, which is available for an unlimited number of sites, and it costs $199. All packages come with 1 year of updates and support, as well as a 30-day refund policy. So, in conclusion, having now used and tested WP Rocket myself, I can safely say it's worth dishing out a bit of money for. That is, if you need it. If you run a pretty simple site, or you're just not fussy about your site being that 1 or 2 seconds faster, you obviously won't need to pay for a premium plugin. Instead, you can use one of the free caching plugins in the WordPress plugin repository. But if you're serious about improving your site's performance, or your client's site's performance, and you're looking for a plugin that can really do it all, WP Rocket's the way to go. Yes, there might be problems along the way, conflicts between plugins or excluding pages and files, but even if you're not the most technical person, I'm sure you'll be able to figure it out with a bit of help from WP Rocket's support team. That's it from me for this review of WP Rocket. If you have any experiences yourselves with this plugin, or perhaps you have something to add to what I've said, feel free to leave a comment below and keep the conversation going. I've been Mark from WP Mayor. Until next time, goodbye.